This is my current server, a Ryzen 5 4650G. Hosted some drives, running image, and a few other containers here and there. It works, but I think I've outgrown it now. I want to run proper Kubernetes, a bare metal cluster. I want to run rook Ceph across multiple nodes for industrial level storage redundancy. I want to learn the kind of infrastructure essentially most engineers only ever see at work, and leading even further to the future, I want to eventually run local AI models on it.
Turning left, because that's exactly what I was hoping to do with my day.
However, I cannot do this in my current hardware, so something essentially has to change. Caveat being, however, I'm also broke. Not really, but I have a budget, being 500 quid for the server and about 150 for the Switch. And I'm not really willing to be ripped off on eBay. So, my question I pose, and what this video is trying to achieve, is how does one actually buy used enterprise servers without it becoming a financial fuck up? I'm going to take you through the exact process, every candidate, every mistake, and what I learned from each of them, so that when you do this, which I hope I inspire at least one person to, that you don't repeat the same mistakes. So here we start. I call them the 4 fuck ups. The first server I seriously considered was the Dell PowerEdge R540, coming with a newer CPU generation, iDRAC Enterprise, and a listing shown for about £280 when buying 2 units, which did fit comfortably within my budget. Half decent servers for less than 500 quid. I'm like, what a day to be alive. What the fuck? What? Each? And I'm like, how am I this blind? So that becomes a total of essentially £760 before I even bought the Switch. A cable or a single drive. Lesson 1. Multiple price. For fucking stupid. Lesson 1. Don't be stupid and actually read the listing. The multiple buy pricing means per unit, not total. Always verify the actual cost before you convince yourself a deal is a steal. Because 9 out of 10, it's not. With the R540 gone, I moved HPE Pro Latent. There were 3 generations: 16GB at £290, 32GB at £420, and last but not least, 64GB at £550. This is where Ceph bit me in the ass a little bit. Ceph essentially runs a process called OSD. This stands for Object Storage Daemon. For every drive it manages, each consumes roughly 4 to 5GB of RAM, give or take. With 4 drives per node, Ceph alone is eating 16 to 20 gigabytes before the OS even boots, before Kubernetes loads a single pod before anything actually starts to run. So therefore, the 16 gigabyte option was dead on arrival. The 32 gigabyte option, doable, but I would hit a ceiling essentially within months of starting it. And with the current RAM prices, I ain't doing that. The 64GB, however, was correctly spec'd, but being at £550, it's over my budget already, really. So the lesson is not about RAM, essentially. It's about headroom. The question is never what does it cost today, it's whether do I have enough room in the future to do the job which I actually want to do, and stay true to your budget. Now moving on to the Dell 430, coming at £384, good CPU generation, drivers included, but also, it's a nice cherry on top, the seller was happy to swap the RAID controller, as Ceph base isn't really like RAID, with no extra cost. It's one of the requirements should have stated at the start, which I didn't to myself. I wanted to run AI models, and that really requires a GPU. It's a single requirement, this being a 1U server, eliminate the server entirely. The 1U server achieved a slim profile to aggressive physical compromises, and one of those compromises is they cannot physically accommodate a full GPU height, but especially consumer GPUs, as their heatsinks are massive. The slot simply just would not fit. But lesson from that, you cannot buy your way out of chassis limitation, no matter how much you spend on components. Now I know what you're saying, not Facebook Marketplace, but I was like, this shit looks pretty good. So the Dell R720 was essentially the best list I had now up to this point. Coming with 128GB of RAM, 2 U chassis. On paper, this was a godsend. Thank everything holy I did not buy it. I read it rabbit hole later, basically surfaced a specific concern about this server's Sandy Bridge area BIOS and its inconsistent support for above 4G decoding. A BIOS feature that allows modern GPUs with a large VRAM to map to its memory correctly above the 4GB address boundary. Without it, a GPU may fail to initialize entirely, and it's a bit of a headache. Due to my GPU requirements, the R720 was essentially shelved. Shame, but I want a GPU. The lesson here, the age of servers, BIOS, and generation has direct implications for modern hardware that go beyond the raw performance numbers. Now, after all that debacle, I found the Dell EMC PowerEdge R540, 14th generation, modern UEFI BIOS with a confirmed but4 decoding, G compatibility, 2U chassis with full height PCIe slots, now and one reserved for later for the GPU, 3.8 large form factor bays, which is better as 3.5-inch drives are cheaper. Ceph has a minimum of 3 OSDs without me buying the drive separately, as the drives come included, and I actually had a good conversation with the seller, gave me good answers, and at £430, done, dusted, take my money. Now, moving on to the Switch era, ran in parallel and had its own arc. I knew I essentially wanted a Arista Switch. I know what I was going to say, they're expensive, just get a Cisco. But I use that at work, and I essentially want to directly develop my skills professionally. For my use case, it was worth it. So the first candidate was a German seller. £140, I don't think it was too bad at the time. I asked 3 specific questions, the EOS version, and can you basically just show this in the CLI? And also, as we're in Germany, I live in the UK, I wanted to see how much the VAT would be. This is where the red flags started to appear. The response was essentially no information, not possible, and VAT is charged separately at the border. Thanks, Boris.
Does Brexit make my passport expire? No. But it does mean that you are entitled to a beautiful new passport.
When the seller essentially can't tell you a very basic thing, like what software version it is running on a device, that's not a communication problem, that's just an outright knowledge problem. So therefore, I just walked away, not worth my time. Now the second candidate being a UK seller, got my lesson there, being a DSC 7050S. Look better, but when I actually understood what S means, S is essentially a designation for small form factors. You can't plug a Ethernet right into it, you need a NIC. And so every report requires a transceiver to make a physical connection. Being around £15 to £30 each, with 2 servers and a management machine, that's an extra 45 to 100 quid on top of the Switch price. That was a hard pass, I'm not gonna lie. The third candidate being a DSC 7010T-48 from iTin stock. The listing told me the EOS version before I even asked. It was also layer 2, layer 3 confirmed, 48 RG45 copper access ports, 4 small form factor uplinks for when I add 10GB Ethernet NICs later, 1 year warranty, 30-day returns, £130, and an eBay discount, might add. I did not think that was that bad. So every question the German seller could not answer, the iTunes guy already had answered in the listing itself. That contrast tells you everything about the difference between a seller and who knows their inventory and who does not. Bought that without hesitation. To answer the question of this video, can you buy use enterprise hardware without getting burned? Yes, definitely possible. I think I've demonstrated that in this video, but you have to do your research, thorough research, before you even click buy. 4 things you have to do, which I learned the most. Verify the iDRAC or management license before buying, not after. 2. Confirm the RAID controller can be swapped for a HBB pass-through if you're running Ceph. 3. Check the chassis form factor against future upgrades you are planning to do. 1U rack does not care about your GPU aspirations. It will just say put that externally on it and it will be a fucking racket. Then 4. Ask specific technical questions before you commit. The quality of the answers tells you more about the listing itself. I've bought the server, now I bought the Switch. Now I just need to set it up and go through the mental torment of doing that. Looks like